Hello, this is Dr. Nazare coming with some new information for you again. I realized today, thinking about doing this video, that I often say that I'm offering you new concepts, new ideas, some of them my own, some of them from my training as a psychoanalyst or a psychologist, and that I haven't necessarily followed through on expanding on those ideas. So I thought that today I will go ahead and expand on one of the latest concepts that I've introduced to you. This is not my own concept. This is an idea that comes from psychoanalysis. And it is a way of understanding how our minds create a filter in how we understand ourselves and others in terms of our valuing of the other or of ourselves. So last time I talked, I spoke of this thing called self-other organization. So to attend to that a little further, I was saying that there's 4 options, right? One is you're good. So in other words, you think of yourself typically as being good, and the other is good also. When somebody has this makeup, this is the healthiest, most stable, most wonderful makeup. They tend to take in new people and new relationships and strangers, imagining them as being good to begin with. So they start from a baseline of goodness, meaning they don't imagine the other having bad intentions or how to hurt them or to take advantage of them, that sort of thing. And they also don't have a view of themselves as bad, as having many problems or having many deficits or just plain feeling like they're a bad person. They don't have that. So they think of themselves as good in general. And because they're healthy that way on both sides, they tend to feel more relaxed and more relaxed about the other, of course, because they're imagining the other positive. And they also tend to have a relaxation about themselves because they have this sense. It's a kind of, it's behind the hood, as you will. It's not something that you're necessarily aware of, but your attitude shows that you don't tend to think that people make a comment to criticize you. You wouldn't be what I talked about, the criticism club, earlier in one of the videos. That wouldn't be you. You wouldn't be automatically thinking that people are going to do you harm or think of you poorly. This would be the result of the most idyllic childhood. And that would be, I want to remind everybody that I was talking to a patient today and reminding her that there is no child that comes out of childhood uninjured. They could come out of childhood without trauma, but uninjured is not possible. And the reason that is because we are, of all the animals and the different species in the world, we are the species that lasts the longest in developing. Years and years and years. A new horse can be out of the mother's womb and up and walking within half an hour or an hour, amazingly. But for us, it takes many, many years. And so we are so dependent for so long that many things can go wrong. So don't even think of meeting anybody not injured. In fact, keep in mind that everybody is. That would make you kinder. And also, it would give you the opportunity to consider that when somebody does something that surprises you, that it might have to do with an injury rather than thinking poorly of them. So this is me right now evidencing my self-other, which is that I think positively of people. And I don't tend to think that people are out to harm me. And I actually make the mistake of not noticing sometimes when somebody's not treating me very well. I actually still think positively of them. I don't recommend that, but that's just my makeup. My makeup is either good and I am bad. And I didn't know about my being bad until recently, by the way. So now we've done the good, and I've given you an example of how I was thinking at the other. And by thinking of something injurious in the other when they're not behaving very well, by imagining that there may be some injury, you become more understanding, more compassionate, and not defensive. So the next one would be the bad self, good other, which is what I was telling you is what I am. And when you're like that, you do tend to think that others are good. But if you have a lot of trauma, very severe trauma, it is very likely that you will have this makeup. And what happens is that one of the reasons that you are so forgiving and you continue to give gifts to people who have treated you poorly or continue a relationship with somebody who's done you harm is because your sense of self is bad. So the way to survive that is to insist almost compulsively that the other be good. So that's the example I gave you last time about this 70-year-old woman that was my patient, who was still taking care of her father and mother excessively, really, to an excess. And she had had a very traumatic childhood with emotional neglect and physical violence. So that's the bad self, good other. So the next one would be that the other is bad and that you're bad too. And I was telling you last time that that makeup is the worst of the worst, because you're always in bad shape internally, because it's a paranoid state, because you're always thinking that others have bad intentions, but you also feel that you're bad. That makeup can create the most extreme behaviors, because the same way that I would be compelled to be nice and continue relationships and continue treating and relating to people who have not been nice to me or even injured me, is because that sense of badness is so unbearing, it's so unbelievably unbearable, that you unconsciously try to avoid it and insist that the other's good, because if the other's not good, you collapse into you being bad, okay? So in this case that I'm explaining, the bad self, bad other, you have that compulsion. But in that case, when the other is also seen as bad, you survive your badness, not by my method, which is not just my method, by the way, okay? It's everybody who has bad self, good other is going to have that dynamic. But you survive being bad by always having somebody be bad. So this, again, is a concept from psychoanalysis. But many years ago, I remember noticing something when I was traveling to the south of Spain. I was traveling with my oldest daughter and my mother. And my mother was married at the time to a person who was not my father. My father died when I was rather young. So we were traveling to a bungalow that she had by the coast in Spain. And I thought that she was traveling with her husband. But at the last minute, I realized that he wasn't coming with us. And I immediately got really anxious. And I didn't know why, but I got really anxious. And eventually I realized why. And it's because my mother always needed to have somebody be bad, somebody to complain about, and somebody who was doing wrong things and bad things to her. I didn't actually know it intellectually, but I knew it intuitively. And lo and behold, she ended up getting into a horrific fight with my daughter. I mean, extreme. But my mother was extreme. So people who have bad self, bad other, unfortunately, are people who could have the most extreme behaviors, because it is imperative to stay out of their badness. It's imperative that the other be bad. So somebody has to be bad. Years later from that incident with my mother, I had a patient that was in a very turbulent relationship. I had seen the girlfriend first, then she brought him for couples, then I would see them for couples and individually, and they would break up and get back together, break up and get back together. And one of the things he told me, this patient, one day, was that he didn't understand why she would find all these faults with him, and she never seemed to be able to admit anything about her. And at that point, I realized, oh, this is this situation where the other always needs somebody to be bad. So she could not really ever take responsibility, her girlfriend, because taking responsibility would kind of land her in this sense of badness that was unbearable. And that is a problem. And you may now begin to consider, do you know somebody who seems to always have somebody be bad? And they could be, they basically typically pick a person. It could be their boyfriends, their girlfriend, the mother, the father, a friend, but they never seem to be in a place where everybody's okay. They're complaining about somebody. Somebody's doing something wrong. So that's the worst. And the last one would be good self, bad other, I've already explained to you because that was me. So the only one remaining is good self, bad other. Yeah, that would be it. Good self, bad other. So that the person still thinks poorly of themselves, but that characteristic tends to be a milder way of behaving because their sense of self is as good. So, so one of the things that I wanted to offer, because I've been talking about this with my patients since I did the video, is that you begin to look at where you fit in these categories. And also begin to see where people you know fit in these categories. And then you can, of course, post questions on the YouTubes or on, where is the other place I show? The Instagram. You could post questions and I will look through them and be able to answer you. And I imagine that some of you have met people or are in relationship with people where somebody always has to be bad. And I want you to consider that that person may appear to you like they think they're not bad, but I assure you that if they thought that they weren't bad, they wouldn't be compulsively needing somebody to be bad. It's only because they're trying to avoid being bad that they need someone to be bad, okay? In the same way that I keep relationships and keep bringing gifts and keep approaching somebody that has treated me poorly because I'm avoiding landing in the horrible sadness and depression of being the bad one. And this all comes from childhood. And these characteristics and these patterns are, we develop them before the age of 2.5. So we're not conscious of it. So I want you to go ahead and notice where do you fit in, and where does your partner fit in, or your mother fit in, and then pose some questions so I can help you further with that. So that's going to be it for today. And I do ask you to subscribe so that we can grow this little family of viewers, as well as put the little bell if you want to be notified when there's new videos. And then I'll see you next time. And I hope that you learn from this and that you can use it, and that you can, my leitmotif is be kind. I do a women's group where this week I'm going to have the reunion, and one of the women hears me say all the time, be kind, and she's going to give us t-shirts to be kind. You don't get a t-shirt, you viewers, but you do get my emphasis on when you're taking care of something with somebody, try to be kind. It benefits everybody. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you the next time.